to another Unlock Coding workshop video, and today we're going to be diving into data types, variables, and Python print statements. So without further ado, let's get started. So I have a box. Let's just dive into this with a box. So I have this box right here, and this box, I'm going to pretend that this box stores everything I ever wanted to store, right? It stores everything. So inside of this box, I'm going to put in a couple of words and see if and put these words inside of the box. So let's do that. Well, okay. I put hi people inside of this box. Nice. So this box is just storing hi people. Let's put another thing in here. In fact, actually, let's just keep hi people. Sorry. In the other box, I want to store a number. So I'm going to put 1 inside of that. And then in this box, third box, I'm going to put a decimal. So I'm going to put 3.14. Okay. And we have one more thing left. So I'm just thinking that, is it going to be raining today? Well, no. So it's false. It's not going to rain today. In fact, it's not raining today. So, false. Now, what I just showed you, these boxes, ignore the stuff inside of the boxes just for 1 minute. These boxes, these boxes. Let's highlight this one. This box is called, this box, not the stuff inside, the box only, is called a variable. Just understand what that means. Let that soak in. And this box right here, this highlight around the box, this is a variable. The stuff inside of this box, only this box in particular, is called a string. It's called a string. Okay? Pretty straightforward, right? A string is just something that, it's just text that humans can read, but the computer can't. The computer can't read a string. It thinks this is all gibberish, when in reality, for us, it is not. So when we say hi people, that actually means that actually shows that the computer doesn't understand a single word. It is just doing what it's told. And it is being told inside of these quotation marks to print out whatever is inside of them. So if I wanted to put something else, right? Let's try putting something else inside of these quotation marks. Let's try putting coding inside of these marks. Let's try putting coding in there. Right, and then full stop. So coding. This is also a string. Anything inside of quotation marks right here are strings. So hopefully that made sense. So the box is a variable, and whatever is inside of that box could be a string. Could be. Put emphasis on could be a string. Now, let's focus on the next one really quickly. So we just learned that this outer box is called a variable, right? Only the box, not what's inside of the box itself is called a variable. But whatever's inside of it, this thing, for example, this one, is actually an integer. Us programmers, we love these complex names. It's called an integer. I'm just going to call it int here, but it's an integer. If you guys have ever done math, you'll know that integers are any positive or negative whole numbers, and it's pretty straightforward to know. So once again, anything that's inside of the box could be a string or an int. That's what we know so far. And the box itself is called a variable. So hopefully we understand what a variable is. This is called a float. Not a decimal, a float. Now, a float number, or a floating point number as we like to say, is a number that is basically a decimal. That's all that is to know about it. It's literally a decimal. And once again, the box that it is being contained in is called a variable. Okay, makes sense, right? So we know that you can have a string inside these boxes, you can have an int inside of one of these, integer inside of one of these boxes, or you can have a simple float inside. Okay, well, we have one more thing we need to learn, and that is the false statement. False or true, in fact. So the box that it's being, we know, let's break it down. So the box that's being held in is called a variable. All right, pretty straightforward. And the value inside of this box, this specific particular box, is actually called a boolean. And I like to remember it by a certain person. His last name was Boolean, and he was actually one of the founding fathers of Boolean math and Boolean geometry, and Boolean algebra, excuse me. And a Boolean is basically a true or a false. A Boolean can literally hold two values, or one of the two values. It could hold a true, which is not our case, or it could hold a false, which is. So it can hold a true or a false. That's all we need to know. So let's recap, right? We love recapping. So a Boolean, I'll just call it bool, is anything that's true or false. False. Let's put that in there. And an integer, I'll abbreviate it to int, is nothing but a number that is negative or positive and is a whole number. So it could be negative, it could be positive, but has to be whole num. I'll abbreviate it to num. So that's a Boolean and an integer. A float is just nothing but a decimal number. It could be a positive number, it could be a negative decimal number. It's just a decimal number. I'll call it num for short. And finally, your Boolean, you have your integer, and then you have your string. A string is gobbledygook to a computer. But to us, that makes sense. So string is basically text. And it is stored within, stored within, and then I'll put quotation marks. So it's stored within quotation marks. Whatever could be in there. So we understand that, right? So all of these, this Boolean, this int, this float, this string, these are what we call data types. Now you might be thinking, why is there so much vocab? Well, if you understand what it actually means, there's not much to remember, right? So let's break it down one by one. A string is just text. A float is just a decimal number. Let's think of it like this. So you have 3.14, that's a floating number. Whatever is after the 3, so if you were to ignore the 4 for 1, 4 right now, if you were to just keep your eye on the 3, that's an integer, right? But at the end of it is actually a float. It's this 0.14 is actually floating. So think of it like that. So that's a float number. An integer. Well, if you guys have done math, which all of you guys have, then we would all know that a floating number or an integer number is just a positive or negative whole number. So it could be -3, it could be 4, it could be 5, it could be -3,000, right? It could be anything. So, but it cannot be a decimal. Not decimal. It's not a decimal. Do not confuse that. If you confuse it with decimals, then your program will not run. But that's a integer. A Boolean is just true or false. You have to memorize that. There is historical There is historical significance behind the Boolean. It is still used a lot today in programming, but all of these are called data types. Why? Because anything it store, any of these data types, these are called types, but the data that is stored within it is also a certain type. So a string is actually just text, and that text is stored within a string. So you call text a string, you call a decimal a float, you call a whole number an integer, and you call a Boolean value, well, or you call true or false a Boolean value.
So let's make our way over to the Python compiler, and we're going to identify what each of these variables are. So I already put a note here, but if you guys don't believe me, let's do a quick little exercise with a new function that we use to identify the type of the variable. So as I mentioned earlier on, these are all called data types, and they all fall under the same category of data type. That's an umbrella term, a general term. So let's see what kind of data type this is. So there's a specific function, it's called type, and in the type function, you can put in whatever variable you want to put. So let's put salutations, and then you can print out. You can run it, and then it gave me no output. The reason why is because you need another function to put this value into the console. So that is called a print function. So you add print around type, and it's going to give you class. You can ignore this, but you can see that it is str, or in this case, string. Now, let's try another variable. Let's see is raining. It gave me bool. So all this essentially states is it basically gives you the value, what value each variable holds, and this is going to be pretty useful later on as you get into more and more advanced Python. In Python, when establishing variables, Python doesn't really care about what these are. Unlike certain other languages where you have to initiate a string by doing string salutations, for example, Java makes you do this, and then new string. Unlike that, Python is very easy to work with. That's why we say good syntax, because it doesn't require you to establish a salutation, or it doesn't tell you to, or doesn't request of you to establish what kind of data type that variable is going to be, which is pretty neat because you can change it to whatever you need it to be later on as you um, work with variables. Now, another thing that we dived in was changing the variable um, value. So, for example, salutations, there's a term that we use to change when we change a variable, and that's called its immutability, or how mutable is the string? Meaning, can you replace the string or can you not replace the string? And in Python, not immutable. So that means once a string is created, its content cannot be changed in place. So like whatever uh, value you put here for this string will not be changed. So um, this ensures that whatever you write here will stay in that location. So let's see. Let's try to change it. So it'll change. So it'll still, but this will still be there. So in memory, this will still be there, but instead of this pointing to this, salutations will now point to our new string. So it's going to point towards, let's say, hi. And then we're going to print out salutations. And it printed out hi. So strings are not mutable, meaning this did not get replaced with hi. This didn't get replaced. All the computer did was when salutations was pointing towards good evening, Mr. Muffin Man, it now removed that pointer to Muffin Man and it made that pointer to hi. So that's what this is. So these are all just pointers. So let's remove this. Let's see what happens. And there you go. Now let's try to do the same thing for the digit pi. Let's get another number. Boy. Okay. We can do 2.73 for like that. Now let's see what pi will be once we run it. So with same thing with this, you can change the value of the variable after declaring it up here, and that's pretty nice to have. Now let's see what we can do. So let's do is raining. Is it true? Let's see if is raining is true. And true. So it's printing out all the values. Same thing with x. I'm not going to go ahead and do it, but I think you understand the gist of how data types work. So variables are basically boxes. To review, variables are basically boxes that store data, and that kind of data is essential in many different uses later on as you get into the advanced Python section.